Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. CATII CATIII approaches represent a very low part of approaches flown by pilot during the year. However, these approaches necessitate very specific procedures to apply, especially regarding the management of failure cases. During the past years, we have received many feedbacks from operators complaining about the lack of clarity on the way CATII CATIII approaches are described in the FCOM. Based on this feedback and for FCOM continuous improvement, we have decided to make a review of the CATII CATIII section of the FCOM. I'm going to present you how we have improved the FCOM by separating the CATII CATIII specificities from the Autoland specificities. I will show you also a technical modification that we have introduced to better identify failures during CATII CATIII approach. My presentation is divided into three parts. In the first part, we will review the previous FCOM. In the second part, we will review the new FCOM QRH philosophy that we have chosen to cover CATII CATIII approaches. And in the third part, I will show you an overview of these modifications. Let's start with the previous FCOM. As you know, the FCOM SOP contains a section called Approach. This section is divided into three parts. In the first part, Approach General, we will give some definitions. The second part is called Aircraft Configuration Management. This section described the management of the energy of the aircraft that is common to all approach types and all guidance modes. And we have a third section called Aircraft Guidance Management that will provide the procedure to apply to fly a given guidance mode. So you will find in this section the different guidance modes that are used to fly an approach. The approach using log light slope guidance section of the FCOM covers only CAT1 approaches. It does not cover CATII CATIII operations. In the SOP landing, you have the procedure to fly a manual landing only. The autoland is not described in this section. Finally, everything which is linked to CATII CATIII approaches is given in a dedicated section of the FCOM called System-Related Procedure, where you have a lot of information linked to CATII CATIII approaches and to autoland, and CATII CATIII specificities are mixed with the autoland procedure. All these chapters deal with CATII CATIII and autoland. So you will find the task sharing that is given for a given type of LVO approach, in this example, CAT3 approach with DH. And this illustration provides the management of failure cases. And this is this section for which we have received feedbacks from operators. So we have reviewed this previous FCOM. We have seen that in the SOP approach, we cover only CAT1 approaches, and in the SOP landing, we cover only manual landing. We have seen also that CATII CATIII specificities were mixed with the autoland specificities, and these specificities were given in a dedicated section, System-Related Procedure. Let's now have a look to the new FCOM QRH philosophy that we have chosen to improve the layout of CATII CATIII approaches. To define this philosophy, we first speak about the technical background. autoland and manual landing. The autoland has been demonstrated for ILS CAT2 and CAT3 signals and for GLS CAT1. However, the autoland is possible on ILS CAT1 in CAT1 or better weather conditions under the airline responsibilities. So it means that the autoland is not always linked to CAT2, CAT3 operation. You can perform an autoland on an ILS CAT1 signal if you follow some given conditions of the FCOM, and you can perform autoland on ILS CAT2, CAT3 signals. Another point is that the manual landing is possible on some LVO approaches, Special Authorization CAT1 or CAT2 approaches. I'll remind you that Special Authorization CAT1 is a CAT1 approach with reduced minima that you can fly if you use the HUD. Another point is the approach guidance mode. For CAT1, CAT2, CAT3 operations, the log glide slope mode is always used. As a reminder, the cross-reference table that is given in the approach general section of the SOP provides the guidance modes that can be used depending on the approach type. And you can see that for ILS, MLS or GLS approach, the log glide slope mode is always used. So here is the philosophy chosen to cover CAT2, CAT3 approaches and autoland. We will manage CAT1, CAT2, CAT3 specificities in the SOP approach using log glide slope guidance. So before, only CAT1 approaches were described, and now we cover also CAT2, CAT3 SOP specificities, as well as CAT2, CAT3 failure management. We also manage the autoland procedure in the SOP landing. So we'll create a new chapter called autoland. So in the existing FCOM you had manual landing, and the new FCOM will cover the autoland. And finally, the task sharing for CAT2, CAT3 approaches and for autoland will be described in the QRH in the section Approach using log glide slope guidance and the autoland section that is created for this purpose. So we have seen that we have separated CAT2, CAT3 specificities from autoland specificities. We create a dedicated section in the SOP Approach using log glide slope guidance to cover CAT2, CAT3 specificities and to cover the management of failure cases. And we create also a section called Autoland in the SOP landing. Let's now have an overview of these modifications. So we start with the section Approach using log glide slope guidance. As you know, in this chapter, we cover all the specificities that are linked to a given guidance mode for all the different flight phases. So in this chapter, we will find a paragraph for descent preparation. In descent preparation, we'll have to determine the approach minimum. And you have to always choose the lowest minima to anticipate a degradation of the weather. These minima are based on the crew qualification, the airline operating manual requirement, the aircraft technical status, and the airport status. For CAT3 with no DH approach, you have to answer no in the DH field of the MCDU to avoid false 100 above or minimum auto callout. You'll have also to perform a briefing, and this briefing must be adapted to CAT2, CAT3 approaches. So you will review during this briefing the task sharing and the callout, the management of the degraded guidance, and the low visibility procedures at the airport. We continue in the section Approach using log glide slope guidance. And here are the actions to be performed during the final approach. At 350 feet radio altimeter, you have to check that the land mode is engaged. This action is common to all approach type CAT1, CAT2, CAT3 approaches. But if you want to perform an auto-land, the land mode has to be engaged. If the land mode is not displayed, auto-land is not authorized. Then, for CAT1, CAT2, CAT3 with DH approach, the decision to continue or to go around is based on visual references. So at entered minimum, if visual references are sufficient, continue announce. You can continue if you have visual references. But for CAT3 without DH approaches, the callout continue is not based on visual references, but it is based on the alert height. So when you fly a CAT3 without DH approach, you will have to call continue at the alert height, which is 100 feet for A320 and 200 feet on other aircraft. I remind you that the alert height is a notion that is used for failed operational systems. And a failed operational systems is necessary to fly CAT3 with no DH approaches. It is represented on the FMA with the CAT3 dual landing capability. When you are below this alert height, if a failure occurs, you can continue the approach because the redundancy ensures the possibility to perform the autoland, unless the autoland warning lights come on, and we will see these conditions later on in the presentation. So we are still in the approach using log glide slope guidance section. And we now speak about the management of degraded guidance. As you have seen before, these was the triggers of actions during CAT2, CAT3 approaches regarding the failures. We have simplified these triggers into only two triggers, amber caution single chime or landing capability degradation. These two triggers covers the triggers that you had before for failure management. So it makes the decision making easier, and it's a simple way for failure identification. Let's now have a look to the actions that should be performed in case of failure. So for CAT2, CAT3 operations, in the case of amber caution single chime or landing capability degradation, you have these three steps: above 1000 feet, below 1000 feet, and below 100 feet for CAT3 dual landing capability. And on top of that, we will cover the autoland warning light. Above 1000 feet, if you have a failure, you have to manage the failure. What does it mean? It means that you have to complete the CATII QRH procedure to check the required equipment, to check the approach and landing capability, and if required, check the RVR, adjust the DH, confirm the briefing. And if all these actions are not performed above 1000 feet, you have to go around. Below 1000 feet, in case of failure, you have to go around, unless visual references are sufficient to continue. Below 100 feet, the alert height for A320 in CAT3 dual landing capability, you can continue if you have a single failure. The approach may be continued unless autoland warning lights comes on. In the case of autoland warning lights, you have to go around, but we still provide the option to continue the landing manually if visual references are sufficient. So you have these cases to manage CAT2, CAT3 failures. manage above 1000 feet, manage the failure. Below 1000 feet, go around. Below 100 feet, the alert height for A320, you can continue. And in the case of autoland warning light, go around. And of course, if you are visual, you can continue the approach. So we have created in the approach using log light slope guidance some lines to cover CAT2, CAT3 operations. So we find approach minimum determine and approach briefing perform. At 350 feet, check that the land mode is engaged. For CAT1, CAT2, CAT3 with DH approach, the decision to continue or go around is based on visual references. For CAT3 with no DH approach, the call-out continue is made at the alert height, 100 feet for A320 in this example. Let's now have a look to the new chapter we have created, the chapter called Autoland. Here are the actions to be performed compared to manual landing. At 350 feet radio altimeter, you have to check the ILS course. You check that the pointer is aligned with the runway course. So why do we perform this check at 350 feet? We perform this check at 350 feet because from 700 feet, the ILS data are frozen inside the multimode receiver. It means that you are not supposed to have any ILS data corruption from 700 feet. And we use the trigger of the land mode to perform this check. So when the land mode is engaged, you have to call land, and then you check the ILS course. At 40 feet radio altimeter, you have to check that the flare mode on the FMA is displayed and to monitor the flare. At 30 feet, check that thrust idle mode is displayed on the FMA. At 10 feet radio altimeter, you have to set the thrust levers to idle at the retard auto callout. In this case, the retard auto callout is an order. For the manual landing, it's more a reminder. You have also to check the lateral guidance and to check that the decrab is well performed by the system. At touchdown, check that the rollout mode is engaged. And finally, at the end of the rollout, AP off. We have also created a dedicated section in the QRH called Autoland to cover the task sharing. And we find this action. At 350 feet, the check of the ILS course. At 40 feet, check that the flare mode is engaged. At 30 feet, check of the thrust idle mode. At 10 feet, at the auto callout retard, both thrust levers to idle and monitor the lateral guidance. At touchdown, rollout mode, check engaged. And at the end of the rollout, when the thrust levers are forward idle, AP off. As a conclusion of this presentation, we have seen that we have separated CAT2, CAT3 specificities from the Autoland specificities. CAT2, CAT3 specificities are covered in the SOP approach using log light slope guidance. We also cover in this section the management of degraded guidance. We have also created a chapter Autoland in the SOP landing to provide the procedure to perform an autoland. The task sharing is also given in the QRH. So we have for this purpose updated the task sharing of the section approach using log light slope guidance, and we have created the task sharing in the QRH for the autoland. We have also improved the failure detection during CATII CATIII approaches. It is now based on the amber caution with single chime or a landing capability degradation. It makes the decision making easier when flying CATII CATIII approach. Finally, what is important to note is that the way to fly CATII CATIII approaches and autoland is unchanged and the training is unchanged. The improvement that we have proposed is linked to the FCOM layout to better understand CATII CATIII specificities and autoland specificities. Thank you.